right, we are going. We are live. Well, we're perhaps not live, but I don't really care. We're at the very least going. So, let me tell you something about the most powerful, the most influential, the greatest weapon you have. And everyone has it. Literally, everyone has it. Unless you're a mute, unless you can't speak. And no, I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm not trying to be fun. I'm not trying to mock anybody. But if you have a language, if you have a voice, if you have vocal cords that are able to deliver words and construct sentences, and you have the ability to speak, which applies to most people, I would assume, especially those who are listening and or watching on this podcast or video, whatever, then you are eligible for applying this weapon. And you want to know what this weapon is, or by the way, let me rephrase that. I was talking about the weapon, about the most influential and the greatest weapon you have in your fight against the time and energy vampires, the Tevs. You want to know what that weapon is? I'll let you know. That weapon is saying no. No. And that's it. Think about what you're doing when you're saying no. You're shifting power. That's what you are. You're essentially rejecting someone's proposal. Now, if you're doing it just to be mean, if you're doing it just to prove a point, if you're doing it just to test and try and out of some weird tactic, then it falls flat. Because if somebody has something that I want and they want to give it to me, then I'm going to say yes. If somebody would give me $1,000, or no, excuse me, if somebody would give me $1 million, $1 million, no strings attached, you can have it. You can have it right now. You don't owe me anything. You don't have to do anything. All I ask is that you receive this $1 million. Then I'm going to say yes, if there are literally no strings attached. Now, that's pretty much never going to happen, I think. But in the black swan event, well, maybe not black swan, but in the rare event that it would happen that somebody would actually give me $1 million or even $1,000, just for the sake of the argument, I'm going to say yes. If I meet some angel investor, some billionaire, and he wants to, I don't know, get rid of his money, whatever, and he wants to donate them to me, then I'm going to accept the money, of course. I'm not going to say no to that. But that's not a time and energy vampire case. A time and energy vampire case, a TEV case, is when you have people who are infringing on your personal space, right? People whom you can't stand. Or, we've been through this before. It doesn't even need to be people. It can be court cases. It can be energy drinks. Because believe it, energy drinks might be the biggest TEVs there are. Literally, they might be the biggest TEVs there are. You think you're getting energy by drinking this sugar-loaded, caffeinated beverage filled with all sorts of substances and preservatives that no doubt is unhealthy in one way or the other for your stomach. Just listen, I'm not a doctor, but don't sit here and tell me that energy drinks are healthy for you, because they're really not. They're not. They're crap. That's my honest stance. And yes, I've been down this road before. I'm not going to go through it again, whatever. So, court cases, energy drinks, bureaucracy, paper mills, all that kind of crap. Those are massive energy vampires, time and energy vampires, the intangible TEVs. So, and of course, there are other people, right? Say no to them. I'm going to give you a quick example of how you can apply this in practice without even saying no. So, way back in the workforce, I was working, obviously, had a job, and some woman there, let's call her Maggie, not her real name, of course, just so you know, was there, and she would take up an immense load of personal space. She would always walk into our conversation, take over the entire conversation, hijack everyone, talk about herself, talk over others, interrupt them mid-sentence. You know what I'm talking about, right? The annoying sort of person. And if two people were talking and she was in the same room or she was part of the group and nobody talked to her, she would get kind of, you could see it in her, on her face, how she was lost, how she was annoyed, how she was almost upset. Like, right? She just couldn't handle it. If you aren't listening, I was making some faces, I was making some grimaces just to show you how confused, offended almost, and annoyed Maggie was when she wasn't partaking in the conversation. So I still remember this moment, and it was just a brief moment. It was a very, very, very insignificant incident, really, but it just struck me as like the epitome of how to handle a TEV in that situation without even saying no. Here's what happened. So we're sitting, conversing, chatting, talking about this, that, the other. Or maybe 4 or 5 guys or something, when she walked in, and we're having a nice chat. Everyone was sort of like enjoying the conversation, and she walks in and everyone goes silent, right? And immediately she says something along the lines of, "Oh, you guys went quiet when I walked in. I wonder why that is. Ha ha." And then she managed like a half wry smile. I think she already partially understood that, or I think she definitely understood that people had had enough of her. So I don't remember what happened exactly next, but somebody said something, and then sort of like the conversation resumed, but now she was there. So immediately, like half a minute after she walked in, 2 of the guys in the group excused themselves and said that they had to leave for a meeting. And when they got off of their chairs and left the room, that was sort of like the excuse the rest of us needed to split up and dissolve the group and walk away. Because now none of us would have to sit there and be tormented by Maggie and her incessant time and energy suck and drain. Nobody said no. Nobody even, visited the thought of saying no. And that's fine. Now, sometimes you have to say no. Let's say that Maggie would have invited me over to her place for some sort of party or get together, or I don't know, whatever. I would have said no. No, I'm not coming. But why is that? Everyone is coming here. It's going to be really nice. You should show up. This is your way to get to know the rest of your work colleagues outside of work, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of crap. No, I'm not coming. But why? Why aren't you coming? Listen, if someone doesn't understand or doesn't want to accept your no, here's what you say. And this was actually suggested to me by somebody else. I didn't invent this myself, but it's really, 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 really brilliant. And just so we're clear here, use this expression, use this statement only if the conversation gets a little bit direct and confrontational. If they understand sort of like your no and they're, the tone is nice and polite, don't use it. But if the conversation gets a little bit direct and aggressive and controversial, but confrontational as well, here's what you say. You simply say, "I stopped explaining myself to other people when I turned 18. That's it. When I turned 18, I became a legal age. I'm an adult. I have the same rights as an adult, and I can say no without having to explaining myself. That's it." And if they then don't accept it, you just walk away or cut the conversation short. But if you're dealing with such people, quite likely they're nutcases and weirdos. So you don't want those people in your life regardless. Anyway, back to the point here. Most of the time, I just say no, and then, "Well, I can't," or "I won't." And then if they, or maybe I'm going to say something like, "No, I can't because I got plans," or some such. And listen, it is true that I'm sort of like giving them the opportunity to accept the no by half deflecting and say and not stating my direct reason. "No, I have plans." That's fine, right? That's not cowering. That's not cowardice. That's just you being nice and giving them an opportunity to accept your no there and then. But then if they go on and they don't want to accept your no, then, no, I don't need to explain myself to you. I stopped explaining myself when I turned 18. Just say that. Try it out. So those are ways to apply the most powerful weapon there is in your fight against the time and energy vampires, the TEVs. Simply say no, because you are born with the inherent right to say no. Never forget that. Never forget that. And in fact, this actually reminds me of another. Well, it all reminds me of 3 books in total. The first ones are called No and Start With No by an author named Jim Camp, who was a negotiations coach. Highly recommend you read them. I was informed of these books by Ben Settle. I've read them both. They're highly educational, especially in the context of conversation. Well, conversation as well, but negotiation and business, but also relationships, really, and also life. If you extrapolate the values that you can extract from those books. Also, the third book that I haven't referenced yet. I'm blanking on the title. This really annoys me. I don't remember the name of the title. It's written by, I think his name is Manuel J. Smith. Yes. No. This really annoys me. This really annoys me when I can't remember of a title. The sequel to the book is called Here Be Dragons. That's the sequel of the book. Anyway, in the untitled book, whose name I can't remember, which really annoys me, I'm trying to desperately think of the book. All right, I need to look it up. I'm gonna look it up on the internet because this is so important. I believe you need to know it. Manuel J. Smith books. Yes, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. That was it. It's in the word, or it's in the book title, really. When I say no, I feel guilty. They want you to feel guilty when you're saying no. Don't let them, because I don't remember the exact wording or the precise text, but in the introduction of the book, there was written something along the lines of, you are born with the inherent right to say no, and nobody can hold that against you. Think about that. You are born with a right to say no, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. Just say no, because remember, they want you to feel guilty. When I say no, I feel guilty. That's exactly what they want. Highly recommend you read that book. Anyway, we're ending things right here. If you like what I have to say, if you want to learn more about time and energy vampires, then consider opting into my email list. The link to do so is in the episode description below, wherever you're watching or listening to this. And with that, I'll see you later.